Time this evening. This is the Franchise Show, and hopefully, we are now live on LinkedIn. We're going to do another mini introduction. We've had a bit of a deep dive if you managed to catch this on YouTube. But we are talking today about franchise succession planning. And we have the lovely Kevin Juser to discuss this with us. So, Kevin, welcome again to the Franchise Show. It's great to have you with us. Really looking forward to getting further into this conversation. But for anyone who has just joined us, give us another quick introduction to yourself, and then we're going to get into the topic again for this last half an hour. And hopefully we are going to be appearing on LinkedIn very soon.
Sounds great. Yeah, my name's Kevin Juza. I'm the Tenacious Leader. I've been in franchise most of my life. I started off with H&R Block supporting franchises locally. My mom actually owned an H&R Block for about 10 years. Myself, I have owned a Snap Fitness franchise. And if I was showing my body, you'd see I shouldn't be in gym business, but that's a different story. I've also, the last couple of years, I've been doing a lot of coaching and helping franchises build their succession plans to the next generation so they can live that legacy that they've built so long and passing it on to their family.
Fantastic. Great introduction again, Kevin. You did it beautifully the first time and beautifully the second time. We could take many introductions. It's great. It's great to hear that you had that that business, that franchise business. When you got into that franchise business, did you yourself have a succession plan? Did you think that far ahead, or was it really exciting at the beginning and you were just really looking forward to the business continuing and growing, and you hadn't really thought that far ahead?
Yeah, I had huge, because I was with H&R Block, so I know how franchises can land and expand. And I really wanted to see that. I was the first one opened in San Diego. And so I signed a 3-package deal. I ended up opening up just 2 of them. But when I first started, saw myself owning, upwards of 10 Snap Fitness franchises in San Diego County. So that was my dream. And then my succession planning at that point was having 10 locations. It's going to be a full-fledged business, and there'll be a chance to pass it down. At that time, my daughters were only like 1 year old, 2 years old. So, I didn't really have a full-fledged succession idea at that time, but I was still pretty young, and I saw it being a 20, 30-year job or a career to own and build that business.
Yeah, that's it. I think this, and I think this is the job of us, or as franchisors, to help people consider, where they are in their life at the point where they join a franchise, and what might happen, what they need to consider. And it's so important to think about where it's going to go next, what's going to happen next, because how you run the business, how you're supported, how you grow it, what you're putting in place is all going to relate back to what you're going to do with it, at the end. All good things must come to an end, I suppose.
Yeah. And the real thing is, your plan at the very beginning is never how it really happens, but it gives you a direction of where you're going. And so a lot of times people get to the point where they thought I was going to sell this thing years ago, but it just kept going. It was easy to just keep the business going because it's like muscle memory. I can do this and it's making my money. I don't have to go look for something else. Maybe I've lost the passion for the business or the product that you're selling, but it's working and it's sustainable. But it gets to that point where if you have good employees or you have a family member active, have you brought that up yet? Interesting story is, one of my clients, I had our first initial conversation when I started working with them. And I usually do some sort of a SWOT analysis, very easy: strengths, weaknesses, opportunity, threats, because I want to understand their full thought of their business and the health of the business and ideas they had to grow their business in the past. And the dad was like, well, I don't even know what we're going to do with this business because I don't know if my son wants it. I don't know if my son's going to get a partner. I don't know if I need to sell it, if somebody wants to buy it. I just don't know what to do with this business. He's had the business for 30 years. And he got it from his father-in-law after about 3 years. The father-in-law says, I'm out. I don't want to do this, too manual labor for me. And so it's a carpet cleaning business. And so in that conversation, I was like, wow, the son, he was sitting right there in that room. And he heard his dad just say, I don't know if he even wants it. I'm like, he's been in he's the number one carpet cleaner for the business. He's been there for 15 years. You don't know if he wants the business. So this is where that relationship of somebody coming in and kind of involved in developing that conversation in a safe space where I can bridge those conversations.
Absolutely. And look, you've done it again, Kevin. The perfect time to mention the bridge by our wonderful sponsors. And in fact, I think Tim's here. And talking to the wonderful people that are here, we are now live on LinkedIn, and forgive the slight technical challenges at the beginning of today's episode. It's going to be an episode in 2 parts. If you want to catch the first part, you can go to YouTube and catch that first 15 minutes. But we are now here live on LinkedIn. It's fantastic to be here. And if you have just joined us, we are talking to Kevin Juza, the tenacious leader. And we are talking about franchise succession planning. So really looking forward to getting everybody's thoughts. Now, talking of everybody, let's welcome a few people that are here. We have the lovely Omar. He is the host of a wonderful thing called Zoom Party. It's always great to have you here, Omar. And he's put hello there. We have the fantastic Nick Plevan, one of our wonderful supporters. Nick is from etalent, and we will be putting your QR code up soon, my friend. Got you at last. Good to be here. Well, it's great to have you here as well, Nick. It's always good to have you here. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts about all things succession. And how that has applied, in your businesses in the past. Omar's coming back to say he is watching from Arizona. Well, it's fantastic to have you here from Arizona, and you're always welcome. So we have the lovely Tim Morris from The Bridge, one of our lovely supporters, and he's put good evening, franchise family, Kevin and Harvey. It's good to be here as always. Well, it's always fantastic to have you here, Tim. Tim is a fantastic supporter and professional here in the UK in the franchise industry. And again, one of our lovely supporters. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts, Tim, on all things succession planning and how we can deal with that in a franchise business effectively for both franchisee and franchisor. Nick has come back with good afternoon from a somewhat chilly Scotland. Yes, it can be that way in Scotland, but it's fantastic to have you here. Let's have a look. We've got Simon Wise. Fantastic to have Simon with us. Big supporter and friend of the show. And he's put, hello, franchise friends, live on LinkedIn. Yes, we are. We fixed our tech issues. That's the fun of doing things live. It proves it's live, doesn't it? You see, this was pre-recorded. You wouldn't get all of this joy. We have the lovely Penny Hopkinson. Penny has been a supporter of our show, and I have been a supporter of Penny for a long time. Penny has put, hello, Harvey and Kevin and franchise friends. Apologies for the late arrival. Tech issues. It wasn't your tech issues, Penny. It was our tech issues. Penny is the writer of a marvelous book all about ops manuals. And Penny, have I got your book the right way around today? We're going to see. No, I haven't. Sorry, Penny. But if you want to get your franchise operations manual the right way around, speak to Penny. I'm very pleased with that. I really am. Great to have you with us as always. We've got a great question coming up from Tim Morris soon, so we're going to put that on the screen. We've got another question coming up from Simon Wise and from Nick Plevan. So let's get into it. Are you ready, Kevin? Let's get into it.
Bring it on. Let's go.
Okay, so let's bring up Tim's question first. Tim's put the subject of succession planning close to my heart. Do you think franchisors speak enough about this and helping franchisees plan to achieve their succession aspirations? It's a fantastic point you're making there, Tim. What do you make of this one? Do we speak about it enough? You know, was it when you joined Snap Fitness? Was it spoken about, or was it all about the excitement of growing the business and being successful?
At the very beginning, they brought it up a lot at the very beginning of your planning of when you're bought in and you write that check and they come in for that training. They talk about your succession. What's your exit strategy? What are you thinking about doing this? But then after that, it kind of went away. I really think that the succession planning happens when the owner feels like it's time to move on and not as much a conversation on what's the strategy. Because if you start that slippery, becomes a slippery slope too. You start bringing those thoughts in there that after when you start talking about succession planning, you start bringing in the conversation of your family member, your daughter, your son, your nephew or niece to take over the business. Then they said, "Okay, let's do it now. Let's go now. Let's go now." And then they get burned out waiting for it to actually happen. And the flip side is the franchise, the owner of the franchise, they kind of don't want to let go yet. They just want to have a conversation. They just want to have a nice pint of Guinness and talk about it in a thoughtful way, to be strategic about it in the next 3 years, you know. But that kind of puts the horse before the cart in a sense, where it then picks up steam faster. So there is a time and a place where you start talking about it more globally. Maybe there's a conversation where when they check in with their financial planner, when they talk about with if they have a business coach, they kind of talk about it maybe once a year to strategize. Do we still think this person could be that person? But then as an owner, I think what you have to be doing is making sure you're putting those steps in place to make sure you're testing the wheels of the next person who you think should take it over. I always say when I'm giving speeches or working with customers, clients, is that the next generation has to earn the business. They're not given the business. You're not selling the business. They have to earn the business. So with that mindset, that changes the thought process of the franchise owner in the sense of, okay, Patrick is going to take this over. So let's sit down and let's think, can he own within the business so he can be successful and believe he can learn what he needs to learn, so he can then become the owner in a year or two.
I think that's really interesting. Earning the business, you know, changing that mindset, changing that language around rather than buying the business. I thought you made another really fascinating point, and I think this is really valid and really important for our industry to consider. I think you're right. Even if you get a good franchisor that talks about succession planning at the beginning, it's something that's spoken about and then probably something that is put aside while you get on with the job of inspiring your franchisees, supporting them, and working to help them be successful. But it's often, you know, perhaps put aside, and it shouldn't be. It's something that should be spoken about because, you know, I know we've spoken, and in part one, I'm now going to call the beginning of this, but in part one, we spoke about a family or a father that was in a business, um, expecting or hoping to hand things down to a son, and the son wasn't necessarily wanting to have that business or ready for it. So if it's to be something that's handed down within a family, you've got to speak about that within a family at the beginning and throughout the process. You know, isn't that right?
Yeah, sometimes I run into franchise owners and they're like, "Kevin, I loved your speech, but my kids don't want my business."
Mm-hmm.
And I sit back, I scratch my head, and I'm like, question, have they seen your P&L?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the kids see you. I don't know if you guys have the same commercial, but the Winchell's donuts from the 90s, the old guy with the black jacket leaving in the morning to make the donuts and then coming home late at night, make the donuts. You know, I got to go make the donuts. And he's just dread in his face and he's not really happy about going to work. And they've seen you do this for time and time again, or you talk negatively about the customer, the business, how tough it is or how challenging it is. but you still do it. Why? Because you got a great P&L and you're making money. But the kids don't see that. They just see the struggle and the hard, the frustration. But their skill set's going to be different than your skill set. So it's going to be different problems for them. They might be great at employee management where you maybe don't enjoy employee management. And so there's those dynamics that kind of come into play. So talking with the next generation and showing them, I know you're an artist, but there's a point where that artistry can be brought into this business and that can fuel your hobby or your passion while you have a business that sustains you and keeps you whole and healthy financially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's really valid. I think the fact that you said that people have different challenges, different problems, you know, it doesn't matter who's succeeding or who is taking over the business. When you're a franchisee or a franchisor, you've really got to consider who that is, how they're going to take over the business. Are they going to provide the same, if not better, value within the franchise than the person that was there beforehand? Whether they're family, whether they're friends, whether they're staff members, or whether they're somebody else, it's really important to make sure that they're aligned. Just like when you're a prospective franchisee looking for a franchise business, you're making sure you're aligned with the values of a franchisor. I think when you're looking to try and take over a franchise business as another franchisee, there's got to be some alignment there. You're taking over an existing territory, an existing customer base. You've got to kind of sort of blend into that and slot into that business well.
Yeah, there's another word I love to bring up, and it's legacy. Because as you're a business owner, you've created this franchise, you've created the brand in your community on the business that you've established. But what is when you leave or when you sell it to somebody or pass it to your family member or whatever, when you drive by that location, you still will have pride and belief that I did that. That is my legacy for the community. I cleaned million carpets in my 30 years of ownership. I cleaned, this is my legacy in this community, and you made an impact. But when you come in and it goes over to another transition or comes to a private equity firm that buys your business, or a person who's got lots of money and they just want to start bringing in businesses that are financially sound, it's not going to make it a big of an impact of a legacy to your community and your customers as it was when you built it. Why? Because you built it, you gave jobs to the community, your profit, your money, you helped the local basketball teams or baseball teams, and you built a community around your success. And that legacy is something that's forgotten. If you don't pass it over to somebody in your family, then it's a next generation that they can say, my family have supported this baseball team for 30 years. That's a legacy that your business created in that community.
Yeah, it's about communities, isn't it? You're absolutely right. And there is a legacy. Let's have a little look, because we've got a few more comments coming up here, and I want to make sure that we recognize people that are with us and have made some fantastic points. So we've dealt with a comment there from Tim. Let's have a look at one from Nick. So Nick has put, just working on a succession plan for my business right now, so this will be particularly timely. Yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't matter whether you're in a franchise business, whether you're in supplying the franchise market with a service. You've got to think about what happens and how you can pass on your business in a way that is positive, and financially and economically rewarding for everyone concerned. I mean, I've got friends that are in the construction industry, as an example. And I think is a great example there of the fact that someone might be a carpenter or a builder or an electrician, and they'll work their way through their life to a point where they can't do that anymore. And that's it. That's the end of it, really. They might be able to get somebody else into the business, but if they do, they've got to bring in an apprentice early. They've got to make sure that person is comfortable with the customer base. This is the same in franchising. You've got a model, you've got a box of tools around you so that you can hopefully do as good a job as you possibly can do. But you've got to you've got to bring someone in early enough, you know, if it's, and you've got to establish that interest early, haven't you? You know, particularly family members, you know. I always encourage, and I know a lot of other people do, that when you're making a decision on a franchise, you should bring other people into that decision making process, family members, children. But look, let's talk about community again, and let's delve a little bit deeper into succession planning and keeping it in the community. Just explain a little bit about your sort of thought process on what it means to keep things in a community, you know, and how perhaps private equity takes that community service and economics away.
Sure. I mean, when I look at the small communities all throughout, I live in San Diego, California, and there you go out 15 miles, you're in these small pockets of communities that service San Diego. So they do their business, their service, and then they bring their money into those communities by paying salaries to people, buying supplies, keeps the churning. They use their money and they give them to their churches or their the gym, local gym, the local businesses that they support. All that money that you then brought from San Diego into your smaller community that's 15 miles outside, because you want that more local connection of 1,000 people neighborhood type of a thing. You then become that wealth of money that gets churned in that community. And the profit that you have, you use to build fences, to add your house, to buy another house, to do something with that money. So in that sense, that if a private equity comes in, yeah, you might get one lump sum. You're never going to get the true value of that from a private equity. You're never going to get, if they give you what you ask, they know something you don't know, and you just lost some value you didn't know about it. But keeping it in your business, your family, the next generation is going to make hell of a lot more money than what you got originally from that private equity firm. But they're going to now take that money and bring it back to San Diego. Your trucks might be there. They might keep the office still there in that small community, but the profit will come back to the big city where the private equity firm's at, and it will just make their pot of gold bigger. But your pot of gold in that community now shrinks. How are they going to, pay for the baseball team that needs that banner so they can get the uniforms for the new kids? The private equity firm's not going to be seen at the school or the community watching the soccer games or whatever that really builds that face of the business.
Yeah, you're right. You don't think about those little things. And yes, you know, if you sell to private equity, you could argue that, you know, the trucks stay there or the building stays there or the staff stay there. But like you say, the profit part of it is being taken out, and the local community spirit and the awareness of what happens locally is being taken out as well. I
I
think you're
remember I know in the Snap Fitness in Escondido, I met very influential people in Escondido in my gym. And when they started knowing who I was, they started trusting me, and I started getting to know people that were just going to go to work out and just wanted to be in their own comfort space, to be there with no identity of who they are in the city. And they built relationships that way that they would not have had, and they would not have felt comfortable talking with me about that. And then when they saw me at the chamber meetings or without, there was that connection, that the spider web connection of people that you just don't have when the founder, the owner, is no longer in that community, having breakfast or going to those chamber meetings to really build connection.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's have a quick look here. I've seen a comment come in here from Simon, and Simon's put, how do you build in the franchisor approval process into your succession planning? Um, I think this is an interesting one, because succession planning it's a joint thing. You know, it sits somewhere between a franchisee and a franchisor, doesn't it? Obviously, the franchisor has to have that, you know, ultimate approval of a new franchisee in a territory. That's probably across the board that's the case. But of course, like you say, you know, there's this legacy that you're building up as a franchisee, you know. And you know, let's take the carpet cleaning. You've cleaned all these carpets and you drive past all these houses and you know these people in the community. that, and you're a trusted professional or a trusted name within that community. So you feel as a franchisee, I think you would feel a certain responsibility to make sure that as you move that on and pass that to somebody else, that you're still driving past those houses with a sense of pride and a sense that you know the right decision, somebody good has come on board. So it's great to be able to influence that. But how do we get, as a franchisee, how do you reckon we get a franchisor on board with our ideas for succession planning?
Well, I'm going to speak about my situation, what I was thinking and planning. So I'm not a lawyer. I'm not. this is seen everywhere, right? So, but basically, you have a business and a company that owns the franchise rights. It's so at an early start, I would think you'd bring in your son or your daughter into the corporation design of that business. So it's a seamless transition. So the family the business owns the rights of that success, the franchisor's contract. So you have since it's been around for 10, 15 years, you might have the best contract that's out there too. So if you had to buy it from them, then you have to reset a new franchisor's contract and sign all that stuff. I would find a way to really build it in so it's nice and slow, where all of a sudden they start coming to those meetings and they start doing the corporate conversations like, yeah, I'm moving into the president of the of the company right now, and I'd be the person working with you for our family business. And you start changing the conversation that you're the go-to within the corporation that owns it. And that seamless transition, then your family can own that's still the franchise original contract. Because I know if you do sell it, they come in and they get to give the new rights of those franchise rights. The contracts are never as much for the franchisor as they were originally 10, 15 years ago.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think that we've spoken about, I think we've mentioned quite a lot today about family members maybe taking over and that being part of your succession planning. But I think it's worth touching upon good staff members, good team members. As franchisees, our people are our businesses. That is true, I would have thought, of every franchise business. The people within those organizations are what is the difference between success and failure. And if you've got a great member of staff that perhaps joins maybe as an apprentice or in a work placement, works their way up within the organization, maybe becomes a manager, they're a pretty good choice for your succession plans, are they not?
I think they are, and because you've been successful for so long, maybe you don't need that cash out of selling it, but you can create a process where you are able to broker the arrangement with that manager to pay over a 10-year period or something like that. So you have your payout. It makes it tax friendlier for you, at least in the States, but also for that manager that worked his way up. They might not have the capital to buy something like that, and they can't get a loan to buy that thing. But so they would be part of it, and then you still own a piece of the legacy of that business as you mentor that person through the transition over the 5, 10 years. Another great thing that franchise owners usually do is they end up buying the building or asset that's underneath the building. So they actually own, that's how you true franchisors thinking long-term success is once you get the business going, how do you have to invest your money? A lot of times it's to buy the building that they were in. So then they lease and manage that business that way too. So it's in a sense, how do you really pass it over? It doesn't have to be a lump sum anymore. It can be just, when my mom sold her H&R Block, it was a 10-year deal, and they just paid once every March when they had the capital influx of their business, and they'd pay then. And they did that over a 10-year period. And my dad owned the business, the property. And so now that contract, maybe is one more year left in that one, then they can start buying the building from them. And it becomes a true long-term, retirement plan. And at any times, if they back out, they get the business back and they keep it going, so there's some continuity why it transitions. There's so many different ways to structure it. It doesn't have to be a commission-based transaction of people getting involved and letting it go.
No, you're right. I had a conversation a fair few weeks ago now with a new person in the franchise industry, a new franchisor. And their model at the beginning was to create a role for somebody that became a manager, and they had a salary for a year. And at the end of that year, they get the opportunity to become the franchisee with a structure in place that makes it easy for somebody who was an employee to become a business owner. And I think you've got to, as franchisors, we've got to be a little bit more inventive, perhaps, on models that we create to allow for succession planning and allow for the sort of natural course of things, that somebody becomes an employee and can become then a business owner from that, and actually have that set out. It's a very interesting way of doing it.
I like Nick's comment here about legacy, and he goes, I just want to make sure the next person has the same values. And that gives you control. When you sell it, it's a financial transaction. You're done. You walk away, and if they screw up your colors or screw up the sign, whatever, they don't care about it. Your friends tell you, man, I had a terrible experience at your old job, your old place. It's hard. And so, but I think the key is two pieces, and that is having somebody that you've coached, you've trained, you make sure they have the same values of service that you're taking over. But what also gets in the way sometimes of franchise to pass it over is to let go and let them do it their way. They have to let them have their own ingenuity and own personality to come through. And sometimes the personality and the tactic gets in the way of the values. So I love that you point on the values, the character of the person who's going to do it with the best intentions, but then you have to let them have their own spirit and their own character, how they're going to pursue the growing the business, because they're going to do it different than you. They're not going to, always have red cup of coffee every Monday. They're going to do it with a purple cup of coffee. Who knows? But they have to let them do it their own way. And that sometimes it's harder for the next generation to just breathe, let go, and let them take baby steps and gain the ownership. That's why I use the word earning the business, because the baby steps of earning the business. They also then trust them to take over with the right actions and character.
It's really interesting. You mentioned sort of characters and values that Nick very rightly alluded to there. Nick runs a business called etalent, and it's all about that. It's all about finding people's real true characters rather than just skills they put on a CV. It's about trying to find what's underneath their soft skills. So it's really important when we're talking about succession planning, when we're talking about, passing something on to somebody else as to how they're going to do it. But you said there, Kevin, about letting go as well. That it's part of it, of course, isn't it? That you do have to let go. You do have to accept the fact that it will be a bit different, and that somebody else putting their mark on the franchise is going to be different to how you did it. In some respects, perhaps not as good. In other respects, perhaps a lot better. And I think that's an important thing to talk about today, the fact that you do have to let go, because if you are planning you're doing your succession planning, that's part of it. That's absolutely part of it. Well, look, we have come to the end of I'm going to say part 2 of today's show, because we had a part 1. We had an exclusive part 1 on YouTube only. So if you want to catch that, I'm going to put a link to part 1. It all shows that this is live and it's all part of the fun. But for those of you that have joined us for part 2 on LinkedIn, it's been fantastic. Our community is amazing as always. It's been a fantastic conversation. It's a topic I think that we can do again. Succession planning is a really important one. So we have now come to the part of the show where I will disappear. Don't worry, this is not another technical issue. It's just that it's now, I believe, illegal for me not to be wearing a hat. So I have another hat on. And this, look at that. I like the hat. You're giving me Del Boy vibes now, Kevin. You're going to have to do some research. Do you know the program Only Fools and Horses?
What's that?
You probably don't know the program Only Fools and Horses, but you need to
No.
check it out. Right?
Okay.
Check out Del Boy when we finish this, but you're giving me the
Okay.
Anyway, look, this is the part of the show where we get under the hat of the guest. And this part of the show is brought to you by PJ Murphy and Son, bespoke British hatters. And he made this wonderful hat. So, Kevin, we're going to stop talking about succession planning now and franchising. We want to find out a little bit about you, my friend. So, have you got a claim to fame? Have you met someone famous, or is there something that people don't know about you, a hobby or something like that? You can pick any of those.
Well, I would one of the claim to fames I hear in San Diego. I actually ran for public office for 3 different offices in my career.
Oh, wow.
And I was very consistent as I lost all 3 times. But
That's good.
everybody appreciated that I tried.
Oh, well, you've got to keep trying. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Absolutely. And I promised that I've been asking questions of you for the last 45 minutes, and you've answered them beautifully. So you do get your chance to get your own back on me if you wish, and you don't have to. But this is the point where you can ask me a question. So fire away if you wish.
Well, when I was young, after college, I took a one-way ticket to London, and from Indiana at the time when I lived there with my parents, and I worked out of a pub in London.
Okay.
And so I lived and worked there, and my favorite beer at that time was a beer called Tanglefoot. I don't know if you ever had that or remembered that name.
Tanglefoot.
And the pub was called The Sun, and it was located right across from the Children's Hospital there in London. And so it was a great memory I have. So my question to you is, do you have a favorite pub in London, and what's your favorite brew?
Oh, that's a very good question. Favorite pub? I think it would have to be my local, but not in London. It's going to have to be my local pub here in Hastings. So I'm going to give a shout out to the Plough down the road. And my favorite brew, I should say Harvey's, because there's a beer called Harvey's, but it isn't, because I like lager. So I'm going to say Camden Hells at the moment is my favorite brew. So there you go. I like that question, and it's made me want a beer now.
Me too, and it's only 10 o'clock here. So
That's it. Fantastic. Well, look, we have now come to the end of today's episode. 3 parts of today's episode. So let's have a little look at what's going on next week. So next week on the Franchise Show, we are going to be talking about the franchise prospect journey. And we're going to be having the lovely Neil Newman and Susie McCafferty on to talk about that. So please join us next Tuesday, 22nd of April, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. And until next time, my friends, take very good care. Cheers.